I arrived in Tokyo, a city I had always dreamt of visiting. The bustling metropolis held a magnetic allure, a blend of modernity and tradition that fascinated me. It was the spring of 1995, and I was excited to explore a culture vastly different from my own. Little did I know that my visit would soon turn into a horrifying ordeal. On that fateful March morning, I was on my way to visit the historic Asakusa Temple. The Tokyo subway system was intricate, a complex web connecting the city's vibrant neighborhoods. As I descended into the depths of the subway, I marveled at the efficiency and orderliness of the stations. The Japanese punctuality was evident in every detail, and I felt a sense of admiration for the meticulousness of their transit system. I boarded a train, the car filled with a mix of commuters and tourists like myself. The rhythmic hum of the train and the chattering of passengers created a symphony that reverberated through the enclosed space. I marveled at the sight of the city flashing by outside, a blur of buildings and lights. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt, jolting everyone within. Confused, we exchanged glances, trying to make sense of the unexpected interruption. The announcement over the speakers was in Japanese, leaving me with a sense of helplessness, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. As minutes turned into an agonizing hour, panic began to set in. Passengers around me grew increasingly anxious, and I could feel a surge of fear building within me. Anxious whispers circulated, and the atmosphere turned tense. Something was terribly wrong, and the knot in my stomach tightened with every passing moment. I pulled out my guidebook, attempting to distract myself from the mounting tension. That's when I noticed a sharp, acrid smell in the air, making my eyes water. Panic rose as I looked around, seeing others reacting similarly. People began to cough and gasp, their faces contorting in distress. The reality of the situation hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't a mere delay, something sinister was unfolding. I tried to remain calm, pushing my way through the throng of panicked passengers, desperately searching for an escape route. Through the haze of confusion and fear, I caught glimpses of passengers collapsing, clutching their throats. The toxin in the air was choking us, suffocating the life out of them. Panic consumed the subway car as people fought for breath, their faces contorted in agony. I stumbled through the chaos, desperately attempting to find a way out. The subway station was a nightmare, a scene of horror I could never have imagined. Bodies lay strewn across the floor, some unconscious and others convulsing. The stench of death and the cries of the injured filled the air. Amidst the chaos, the struggle for survival was intense. The desperation of the passengers to escape the lethal gas turned the subway station into a hellish scene. The suffocating fear pushed people to trample over one another, seeking safety, but inadvertently causing further injury and harm. The strong preyed on the weak, shoving and pushing, disregarding pleas for mercy. The frantic mob crushed against each other, the weight of bodies bearing down, a horrific manifestation of survival instincts gone awry. The echoes of screams and cries for help were drowned out by the deafening panic, a cacophony of human suffering. I found myself caught in the midst of this frenzy, struggling to stay on my feet. The stench of sweat and blood mixed with the acrid smell of the gas. People clawed and clambered over each other, their faces contorted in terror. It was a brutal fight against an unseen enemy, a fight for life itself. As I pushed my way through the throng, I glimpsed the true nature of humanity in a crisis. Some, driven by fear and desperation, resorted to unimaginable acts, leaving scars on both the victims and their own souls. Others, fueled by survival instincts, displayed astonishing acts of heroism and selflessness, assisting the injured and offering a glimmer of hope amidst the despair. I forced myself to keep moving, to find an exit and, hopefully, safety. The station seemed like a maze, a cruel twist of fate. The hallways were clogged with terrified people, desperately trying to escape the invisible terror that lurked in the air. My lungs burned, and each breath felt like daggers in my chest. I pushed through the darkness, praying for an escape from this living nightmare. I stumbled upon an emergency exit, my trembling fingers fumbling with the latch. The door swung open, revealing a stairwell leading to the surface. Finally, I reached the stairwell and began the agonizing climb to the surface. The weight of what I had witnessed bore down on my shoulders. The images of that day would forever be etched into my memory, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the primal instincts that can surface when faced with annihilation. With all the strength I had left, I ascended the stairs, emerging into the daylight, gasping for air. The bustling streets of Tokyo were a stark contrast to the horrors I had just witnessed. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the magnitude of the attack. News of the Tokyo subway sarin attack spread like wildfire. The Aum Shinrikyo cult had unleashed terror, releasing sarin gas in multiple subway stations. The death toll climbed, and the city was in a state of shock and mourning. In the aftermath, I struggled to come to terms with the horror I had experienced. The images of that day haunted my dreams, a reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human cruelty. Tokyo, a city I had once idealized, was forever scarred in my memory. The attack shattered my innocence, leaving me with a profound understanding of the darkness that can lurk in the heart of humanity.
I stepped onto the subway platform, the familiar scent of damp concrete and distant rumble of approaching trains filling the air. It was an ordinary evening, or so I thought. Little did I know that within the next hour, my life would take a horrifying turn, plunging me into a nightmare I could never have anticipated. The station was dimly lit, flickering fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The rhythmic thumping of my heart matched the distant clattering of the train as it approached the station. I edged closer to the edge of the platform, eager to escape the biting cold of the autumn night. The train screeched to a halt, its doors opening with a mechanical hiss. The passengers filed out, and I found an empty seat near the middle of the car. I settled in, pulling out my book, attempting to distract myself from the anxieties of the day. As the train lurched forward, a sense of unease settled in my stomach. The car was nearly empty, only a few passengers scattered throughout. A man in a worn-out coat sat across from me, his hat pulled low, obscuring most of his face. He seemed lost in thought, but something about him made me uncomfortable. Minutes passed, and the train continued its journey through the tunnels. I glanced up from my book and noticed the man was staring at me. His eyes were intense, cold, and devoid of any emotion. My instinct screamed at me to look away, to ignore the dread that was seeping into my bones, but I couldn't. I pretended not to notice, focusing on my book once again. Yet, I could feel his gaze drilling into me, burning through my skin. I decided to move to a different seat, hoping to escape the man's unsettling presence. As I got up and began to walk toward an empty row of seats, the man rose, following me with an eerie determination. Panic began to bubble up inside me, and I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the sense of dread that clung to me like a suffocating shroud. I sat down, trying to compose myself. I noticed the train was slowing down, approaching the next station. I glanced at the man, who was still standing, his eyes fixed on me. The doors opened, and I made a split-second decision to flee, to get off at the station and put distance between myself and the unnerving man. I bolted out of the train just as the doors were closing, leaving the man behind in the dimly lit subway car. My heart raced as I stepped onto the platform, the cold air biting at my cheeks. I took a moment to catch my breath, my mind swirling with confusion and fear. The station was deserted, an eerie silence hanging in the air. I glanced at the electronic sign displaying the train schedule. The next train was set to arrive in 10 minutes. I decided to wait, trying to shake off the unsettling encounter. As I stood on the empty platform, the lights above flickered, casting unsettling shadows that danced along the walls. I felt an inexplicable dread, as if I were being watched. I turned around, my eyes scanning the station, but there was no one in sight. My nerves were on edge as the minutes dragged on. The anticipation of the next train grew, and with it, my anxiety. When the train finally arrived, I stepped inside cautiously, scanning the car for any sign of the man. Thankfully, he was nowhere to be seen. Relieved, I found an empty seat and tried to calm my racing heart. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence, a strange encounter with a peculiar individual. The train continued its journey, and with each passing stop, my unease diminished. But as the train approached my intended destination, the lights flickered once again, plunging the car into darkness. Panic swept through the passengers, and I could hear murmurs of confusion and fear. A sense of foreboding settled over me, a feeling that something was horribly wrong. The emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim glow throughout the car. The train screeched to a halt, and an announcement crackled over the intercom, informing us that there was a technical issue and we would be delayed. My heart sank. Minutes turned into an eternity, and the air grew heavy with tension. Suddenly, a chilling sensation washed over me, and I knew instinctively that something was terribly amiss. The train was supposed to be empty, but I heard shuffling footsteps, the sound echoing ominously through the car. I strained my eyes in the dim light, trying to pierce the darkness. My breath caught as I saw a figure slowly emerging from the shadows, the same man who had been stalking me earlier. He stepped into the feeble light, his face contorted into a sinister grin. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped in the subway car with him. The other passengers were equally horrified, their fear palpable. He approached me, his eyes gleaming with malice. My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. I grabbed my bag and made a run for the end of the car, praying that somehow I could escape. But he was quick, chasing me relentlessly through the confined space. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached the end of the car and tried to pry open the door. The man lunged at me, his grip tightening around my arm. I screamed, struggling to break free. Desperation fueled my strength as I fought to escape his clutches. The door finally gave way, and I stumbled out onto the tracks, narrowly evading his grasp. I sprinted through the darkness of the tunnel, my breath ragged and adrenaline surging. Behind me, the man's footsteps echoed menacingly. I pushed myself harder, praying for a way out, for a miracle. Up ahead, I saw the faint glow of an exit. Hope surged through me, urging me to push through the fear and exhaustion. I burst out of the tunnel, the cool night air hitting my face like a bomb. I stumbled onto the platform of an unfamiliar station, gasping for breath and grappling with the trauma of what had just transpired. I reported the incident to the authorities, providing a detailed description of the man who had haunted my subway ride. The police launched a search, but he remained elusive, leaving me to grapple with the lingering fear and trauma of that fateful night. To this day, I can't forget the chilling encounter and the terror that lurked within the subway's depths. The memory of those soulless eyes still haunts my nightmares, a constant reminder that evil can manifest in the most unexpected places, even within the shadows of a subway tunnel.
The subway car rattled and swayed as it hurtled through the dimly lit tunnels beneath New York City. It was a routine journey home after a long day at work. I was lost in thought, the rhythmic clattering of the train providing a soothing backdrop to my contemplation. As we neared a station, the train unexpectedly slowed to a crawl. The usual hum of the engines seemed to waver, and an uneasy murmur swept through the passengers. Something was amiss. The lights flickered, and anxiety rippled through the car like a storm gathering strength. The announcement crackled over the intercom, barely audible amidst the growing panic. Experiencing technical difficulties, please remain calm and stay in your seats. We are investigating the issue. A surge of unease coursed through me, and I glanced at my fellow passengers. Faces reflected confusion and worry. Time ticked by, and the lights flickered again before plunging the car into darkness. The realization of being trapped in a powerless subway car set in, accompanied by a wave of fear. Minutes felt like hours, and tension hung heavy in the air. The intercom crackled back to life, the voice strained and urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that there has been a power failure in the tunnel ahead. We are experiencing flooding and rescue teams are on their way. Please stay calm and await further instructions." Panic erupted. People frantically searched for their phones, attempting to call for help or share updates with loved ones. The dim glow of screens cast eerie shadows across their anxious faces. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking as I tried to connect with the outside world, hoping for a signal amidst the concrete and steel. The reality of the situation sank in. We were trapped underground with limited information and dwindling resources. Fear and uncertainty gripped us all as we contemplated the rising waters and the harrowing realization that escape might not come soon enough. Silently, we formed a makeshift community, sharing what little information we had and trying to reassure one another. A young woman named Emily, who had a background in emergency response, took charge, calmly organizing us into groups and encouraging everyone to ration their water and snacks. Hours turned into a seemingly endless night. The subway car had become an island amidst the rising floodwaters. We fashioned a makeshift rope from torn clothing and used it to secure ourselves, attempting to prepare for the possibility of the car being submerged. Emily rallied our spirits, telling stories and cracking jokes to lighten the mood, but anxiety still hung thick in the air. We could hear the distant sound of water, a constant reminder of the encroaching danger. Each drop that seeped in filled us with dread. As the water level continued to rise, we were forced to retreat to the roof of the train car. Huddled together for warmth and comfort, we peered into the darkness, yearning for a glimmer of hope. It was a grim reality, the water now inches from the roof, but we clung to a fragile belief that help would arrive in time. Suddenly, we hear distant shouts echoing through the tunnel. Our hearts soared with a flicker of hope. The rescue team had arrived. We signaled for help, waving our makeshift flag desperately. The shouts grew louder, closer, until finally we saw the reassuring glow of flashlights approaching. With immense relief, we were rescued, one by one, and ushered to safety. The subway car was slowly consumed by the relentless waters, a surreal sight as we stood on solid ground once again. In the aftermath, we learned that a massive storm had caused unprecedented flooding throughout the city, overwhelming the subway system. It was a disaster that took days to fully recover from. As I sat in the warmth of a rescue center, reflecting on the night's events, I realized that in the face of adversity, humanity's resilience and willingness to support one another could conquer even the darkest of circumstances.